Rick and the others head to Atlanta in search of Dixon when zombies suddenly attack the survivor camp. The survivors were killed and injured, and only about 10 people survived. Amy also slowly lost her breath in Andrea's arms. Early the next morning, Daryl checks the zombies again and burns them all together. Andrea, however, kept her sister's body and just stared at her. The others came to persuade her to put it down. Amy's body had to be disposed of, but Andrea never responded. Rick would have liked to enlighten her himself. But to his surprise, Andrea took the gun and aimed it directly at his head. He also had something in his heart to blame Rick for. If they hadn't gone out, wouldn't this have happened? Rick had to leave too. The cleanup was still going on, and Daryl and the two of them were about to burn the bodies of their teammates, but Glenn stopped them. He believes the burns is the zombies, and their teammates should be buried. For the teammates who spent time together before, we all have feelings, and we will not say anything more. On the other hand, Jackie shouted up. She found Jim bleeding. The zombie must have bitten him. T-Dog grabbed him, and Daryl lifted his shirt to see that it was indeed the wound left by the zombie. There was a moment of silence. This was the last thing they wanted to see. Daryl suggests just letting him finish him off with a hoe. Dale also agreed with Daryl's suggestion. Rick objected, saying that Jim was not a zombie or a mad dog biting people. He was just a patient now. Rick has heard that the CDC is working on an antidote, so maybe going there will help. Shane disagreed, saying that the CDC had probably fallen too and that the place to go was Fort Benning, 100 miles away. It's a military base, heavily guarded, and everyone will be safe. Daryl didn't care that the two men were arguing. He grabbed a hoe and went to kill Jim. Rick calms him down again with his gun and tells him he can't kill anyone alive. Shane is also on Rick's side on this one. Finally, Andrea opens the scarf in her hand. It was the necklace she picked up at the department store. Today is her sister's birthday. The necklace has not yet been sent out, and then the yin and yang are separated. Not long after, Amy began to mutate. Andrea had to take out her weapon and send her off for the last time. She did not put her sister's death on Rick but hated herself for not being by her sister's side at that time. Carol also personally disposed of her husband's body. She cried while wielding a hoe as if all the aggression suffered over the years to let out. Now she can live well for herself and her daughter. Rick was very sad that this happened, but he thought he was not at fault. If he had not gotten the guns back, maybe everyone would not have been spared. After dealing with the camp, Shane called a meeting with everyone. He expressed his approval of Rick's proposal to go to the CDC. The next morning, Rick arrived early at the top of the mountain and tried to contact Morgan on his walkie-talkie. Although he didn't get a response, he left a message for Morgan to meet him at the CDC. Everyone was ready to start the migration, but this family chose to leave them. Rick did not object but instead took out a pistol and a few rounds of ammunition and gave it to them. The crowd has also said goodbye to them. In the post-apocalyptic world can only give each other their best wishes. Everyone also no longer dawdles. Rick left a message to Morgan here, and then the crowd began to set off. Jim, who the zombie bit, also stayed in the RV. An hour later, the RV hoses had problems, and the temperature was too high, so everyone had to stop and take a break. Jackie comes out of the car and tells the group that Jim is dying. Rick came to the car to check on him. Jim said that the bumps in the car were causing him pain, and he wanted everyone to leave him there. Rick didn't want to give up on him, but he chose to respect his wishes. They put him under a tree and he liked the environment better instead. Everyone said goodbye to him. After all, is born to die comrades. Rick wanted to leave him a gun, but he refused. Then the group continued to move towards the CDC and finally arrived at the destination in the evening. When they got out of the car, they realized that the place where they thought the army would be stationed had fallen. The place stank to high heaven, and there were corpses everywhere. When they arrived at the entrance, they found the doors locked. By this time, zombies were appearing behind them. Daryl's temper started to flare up, blaming Rick for bringing everyone to a dead end. The children in the crowd also began to sob. The adults also began to argue. Originally listening to Shane's advice to go to Fort Benning military base would be good. Now without supplies, it's hard to get through this evening. As they were evacuating, Rick noticed that the overhead camera was moving and someone was inside. In fact, the doctor inside was indeed watching them, but wasn't about to let them in. Shane is still trying to talk him down, telling him it's a fully automated camera. Rick knocked on the door and shouted, praying for the people inside to open the door. And at this time, the zombies around them began to move toward them. The doctor was also suffering inside, struggling to do the thought process. Just when the crowd was desperate and ready to leave, the door of the CDC opened. The crowd stopped dawdling and quickly entered the building. The hall of this CDC is relatively empty. There is no one. At that moment, a man with a weapon appeared across from them. The man asked if any of them had been infected. Rick could only answer truthfully that the one who was infected did not make it here. The man didn't say anything. He just took a good look at the group members. They have women, children, do not look like bad guys, also put down the gun in their hands, let them hurry to bring in the luggage. Once the door is closed, it cannot be opened. Now the crowd is back from the dead, did not pay attention to the man said the door cannot open things, quickly took the luggage in, and then closed the door. Dr. Jenner then took them underground too. Rick looked at the empty hall and asked why there was no one else. Jenner replied that I was the only one left there. The crowd was in disbelief. They thought the government could develop the vaccine and protect them. Now they were disappointed. After everyone accepted this reality, the group had the best dinner since the end of the world. Jenner said that after the disaster, everyone here left. The situation got worse and worse, military defenses were broken, and many people couldn't face the outside world. They had no choice and ended up committing suicide, leaving Jenner to keep working here. He tries to find a solution to the virus. After dinner, Jenner took them to their respective residences. It was a rare place to have a hot shower. Rick found Jenner alone, thanked him, and talked about the outside world. And his wife Lori is alone in the living room, flipping through books. Shane came here, looking at her stunning back, drinking a bit of wine. Shane became bold. He wants to talk to Lori. He doesn't understand how Lori is so cold now. But Lori blamed Shane for lying to her about Rick's death. Shane was so aggravated that he kept explaining to Lori. When he went to the hospital to save Rick, the military was even slaughtering patients. He hid Rick, but at that time, Rick had no heartbeat. But somehow, he came back to life. If Rick had been alive in the hospital, Lori would not have left and probably have died at home. Shane said that he saved Lori and Carl and has been protecting them. Shane said and started to make a move on Lori. He wanted nothing more than to be with her. That's when Lori grabbed him hard around the neck, which sobered Shane up a bit, and he had to leave the room in anger.